Good morning, everyone, and welcome to BCA Online Chapel. It's Friday, and you finally made it through your first week of online school. My hope is that you're finding a steady routine in your days and that you're coping well with the current circumstances around us. But I wouldn't be surprised if some of you are like me. For myself, trying to minister you guys and moving everything online and staying isolated at home has been incredibly challenging. Even though I consider myself an introvert, I've actually been craving social interaction. I get recharged by being by myself, but eventually I do want to be with people, and I'm missing out on that right now. I wish so badly to see my own friends in person, face to face, and just to talk with them. And I wish I could go kick a ball around or play a sport with somebody. And ultimately, I would much rather be having chapels with you live in person rather than through video like this. So if there is an opportunity for you guys, if I can come to a Zoom breakout meeting and you'd love to hang out with me, I'd love to do that too, if that works for you. During this time of isolation, God has really been showing me that I still have a lot in my heart that I have left to surrender to Him. Ultimately, it's showing how selfish I am. I'm realizing that in myself. I gave my life to Jesus at the age of 4, and since then I've committed my life to living in obedience to God and His commands and wanting to honor Him. There have been many significant moments along the way, successes and failures, and there's been milestones where my faith has been made stronger. Right now, if I were to take a look at my spiritual life and my life in general, I feel like my faith is really being tested during this time. I've mentioned in the past in chapels that I often find myself not even knowingly, but trying to please other people. And especially now that everything is going online and we're taking videos of ourselves, I'm realizing more than ever that that's still something that I'm struggling with. And so the world lived through a screen really shows how vain it is to live a life where your ultimate goal is to please other people. And I'm guessing that you guys know a little bit about what that's like. Despite the circumstances around us, though, I was encouraged by these verses this morning from Hebrews chapter 11. I'm going to read verses 13 to 16. It says, "All of these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth." People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. I'm going to jump to verse 16. "Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for He has prepared a city for them." In this passage, the writer of Hebrews points out the reality that as believers, our home is not here on earth. Instead, we're anticipating a better home in heaven with God. This passage, in the midst of what is famously understood as the Bible's Hall of Fame, so that's where it takes place. So leading up to it, it talks about people like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Moses and Abel and all sorts of heroes of the past, and how they had to live their lives by faith. In other words, they trusted that God would give them what He had promised them. And right here in this passage, the writer is reminding us, the reader today, to live our lives now in faith, that one day we will receive an inheritance that was promised to us, an eternal home with Jesus in heaven. That's what we hope for and live for. And we need to be on guard against living our lives for the things that unbelievers live for, like comfort or fame, or to achieve a certain level of status or power or riches. Instead, our lives as Christians are to be lived with an awareness that our lives are they're not over when we die, but they continue on for eternity. Jesus says something similar in the Sermon on the Mount. In Matthew chapter 6, He says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Essentially, Jesus is communicating the same idea that we read about in Hebrews, that this life is not all that there is, and so don't become fixated on it, even though it's very tempting and we often find ourselves doing that. Rather than being fixated on all that this life has to offer and tempts us to live for, remember that there is a world beyond this one, a kingdom ruled by our King Jesus that we are anxiously waiting for and we long for. Okay, so what does this mean for you today? What it meant to me is that I need to stop worrying about what other people think of me and learn to be content by the simple fact that God loves me, He cares for me, and he cares enough for me that He was willing to die on the cross for me. Not just people in general, but He actually knows me and was willing to die for the sins that I've committed. As we leave and as you go about your weekend, I want to leave this passage with you that comes from 1 John chapter 2. And John says, "Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, the lust of his eyes, and the boasting of what he has and does, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but the man who does the will of God lives forever." Anyways, I wish you guys all a great weekend and pray that you will continue to put your faith in Jesus every day.